Do you think studying is sitting with a book in front of you for hours, rereading the same paragraph 5 times until you memorize it, making colorful summaries you'll never open again? Yeah, that's what most people think. They study 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and then, at exam time, nothing. Total blank. As if they'd never seen the material in their life. And then comes the question no one wants to ask. What if the problem isn't that you're dumb? What if the problem is that no one ever taught you how to study for real? Marty Lobdell spent 40 years teaching, 4 decades observing students, and he noticed something most teachers ignore. His best students weren't the smartest. They were the ones who knew how to study. And the worst students? They weren't dumb. They were simply doing everything wrong. Everything. And when Lobdell showed them what they were doing wrong and taught them the right way, something incredible happened. They started to learn. For real. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with something everyone does. You sit down to study. Grab the book, notebook, highlighter. Everything's set. You start reading. 15 minutes later, you realize you've read 3 pages and absorbed nothing. Your mind was somewhere else. Thinking about what you'll eat for dinner. That message you haven't replied to. The video you watched earlier. You go back to the beginning of the chapter. Try again. Another 15 minutes. Same thing. Now you're annoyed. You fight with yourself. I need to focus. You force the reading. An hour passes. 2 hours. You close the book exhausted, thinking you studied a ton. But you didn't study anything. Lobdell called this passive studying, and it's how 90% of people study. It's inefficient, exhausting, and simply doesn't work. The human brain wasn't designed to absorb information this way. You're treating your brain like an external hard drive. Plug in the information and done, it's saved. But that's not how memory works, not even close. Here's the first principle Lobdell taught that changes everything. You need to break your study time into blocks of 25 to 30 minutes. No more than that. Why? Because your concentration capacity is limited. You might think you can stay focused for 3 straight hours, but you can't. No one can. Studies show that after 25 to 30 minutes, your attention starts to melt. You keep your eyes on the book, but your brain has already left. So you study 25 minutes. Stop. Rest 5 minutes. And this rest isn't grabbing your phone and scrolling feed. It's not starting a series. It's getting up, walking, drinking water, looking out the window, something that gives your brain a real break. Then you come back. Another 25 minutes, another 5-minute break, and so on. But I'll study less, you think. Wrong. You'll study the same amount of time, but with 100% efficiency in each block. It's better to study 2 hours with full attention than 6 hours wandering mentally. Now comes the part that destroys most people. And Lobdell hammered this nonstop. Rereading isn't studying. Highlighting isn't studying. Making pretty summaries isn't studying. They're illusions of productivity. You spend energy, feel busy, but you're not learning. You're just moving information from one place to another without processing it. Think about it. When you read a text and highlight the important parts, what are you doing? You're identifying what's relevant. Okay, that's useful. But then what? You reread what you highlighted. And then? The information goes in through your eyes and drains out. Because you didn't do anything with it. You didn't transform it. You didn't process it. You just skimmed it again. Lobdell said, your brain only learns when it's forced to retrieve information. Not when it receives information. Retrieve. That's the key word. You need to close the book and try to recall what you just read, without looking. Try explaining it to the wall. Try writing from memory. Try making connections. And then, when you can't remember something, that's when you go back to the material. Look again, and try to retrieve once more. This has a name, active recall practice, and it's the most powerful learning method that exists. It works because it simulates exactly what you'll need to do on the exam. On the exam, you don't have the book open. You need to pull the information from memory. So that's what you should train. Not recognizing information when you see it, but pulling information from nothing. I'll give you a concrete example. You're studying biology. You need to learn the Krebs cycle. Bad method. Read the diagram 10 times until you think you've memorized it. Good method. Look at the diagram once with attention. Close the book. Grab a blank sheet. Try to draw the cycle from memory. Things will be missing. It'll be wrong. Great. Open the book. See what you got wrong. Close again. Try drawing it again. Repeat until you can do the full cycle without consulting. Does it seem harder? Yes. And that's exactly why it works. Your brain only builds strong connections when it has to effort. When you force your mind to search for information, you're literally creating and strengthening synapses. When you just read passively, nothing happens. The information passes through, but it doesn't stay. Now, Lobdell went deeper. He taught something about how you study that most people never notice. The difference between recognizing and knowing. Look at this. You read a chapter, then read it again. On the second reading, everything feels familiar. Ah, I know this. I remember this. You close the book, confident. Exam time comes, and where is it? Gone. Why? Because you confused recognition with knowledge. Recognizing is easy. When you see something the second time, your brain says, I've seen this before. It gives a feeling of familiarity, and you interpret that as, I know this. But you don't know it. You just recognize it. Knowing is different. Knowing is being able to generate that information from zero, without help, without a trigger. And the only way to test if you really know is by trying to retrieve without the material in front of you. Lobdell recommended, make flashcards, but not the wrong way. Wrong way is putting what is mitochondria on one side and organelle responsible for ATP production on the other. You read, flip the card, read the answer. Next. That's recognition. Right way. You read the question, try to answer out loud or in writing before flipping the card. If you got it wrong, mark the card. Come back to it. If you got it right, but had to think a lot, mark it too. Only remove it from the pile when the answer comes automatically. And there's another thing Lobdell insisted on. Study in different places. When you always study in the same place, your brain associates the information with that environment. At exam time, when the context changes, memory fails. Solution: vary the place. Study one day in the library, another in the park, another in the kitchen. Now the part no one likes to hear but is crucial. You need to teach what you've learned. Lobdell had a phrase, if you can't teach it, you haven't learned it. And it's absolute truth. When you try to explain something to another person, you're forced to organize the knowledge coherently, fill in gaps, simplify without losing precision. And then you discover where you're confused, where the holes are, where you just memorized words but didn't understand the concept. No one to teach? No problem. Teach the wall. Pretend you're giving a class. Speak out loud. Explain each step. Use examples. Make analogies. If you can explain the concept in 2 minutes clearly, you've learned it. If you ramble, go back and study again. There's a technique Lobdell loved called the Feynman technique. Pick a concept. Write the name at the top of a sheet. Now explain that concept as if teaching a 12-year-old child. No jargon, no complicated terms, just simple language. If you need to use a technical term, explain the term too. When you get stuck, when you can't simplify, it's because you didn't understand. Go back to the material. Learn again. Try explaining again. Repeat until it's crystal clear. Now something Lobdell observed that's fascinating. The timing of when you study matters. It's not just how long you study. It's when. And here there's heavy science. Your brain consolidates memories during sleep, especially during REM sleep. So if you study and sleep right after, retention rate skyrockets. But if you study and stay awake doing other things, new information competes with old, and you lose part of what you learned. That's why Lobdell recommended, study the most important things before sleeping. It doesn't have to be the last thing of the day, but try to have some study hours in the 3 to 4 hours before bed. And sleep. Sleep properly, 7 to 8 hours. It doesn't help to study until 4 a.m. for an 8 a.m. exam. You'll retain less, you'll be tired, and you'll perform worse. It's better to study less and sleep more. And here's another brutal point: spacing. Most people study everything at once. Cram. Shove all the content down their throat the day before the exam. Lobdell said that's the surest way to forget everything in 48 hours. You might pass the exam if you're lucky, but a week later nothing remains. Zero. The right way is to space it out. Study the content today, review tomorrow, review in 3 days, review in a week. Each time you review at longer intervals, the memory gets stronger. It's counterintuitive, because it feels like you're studying less, but you're building long-term memory. And that's what matters. Not passing the exam and forgetting. It's learning for real. And there's another crucial thing. You need to take care of your body. The brain doesn't work in a vacuum. You don't sleep right, eat junk, stay dehydrated. And you think you'll have concentration? You won't. Your brain is 75% water. Even mild dehydration tanks cognition. Exercise increases new neural connections. Do 20 minutes before studying. And eat right. Protein, good fats, complex carbs. Now, let's talk about something Lobdell discovered observing students for decades. Many people study without a clear goal. They open the book and just read, but without direction, without knowing what they need to learn. That's way too inefficient. You need to know exactly what will be tested, what are the key concepts, and focus on them. Before studying, ask questions. What do I need to be able to do after this study? Solve what kind of problem? Explain which concept? Apply which formula? And study with those questions in mind. Don't read just to read. Read to answer specific questions. And test if you can answer them. If you can't, you know exactly what you need to study more. And another thing, distractions. Lobdell was ruthless about this. You can't study with your phone nearby. You just can't. Oh, but I'll only look if it rings. Doesn't matter. The mere presence of the phone reduces your cognitive capacity. There are studies on this. You spend mental energy resisting the temptation to look. Energy that should go to studying. Leave the phone in another room. Turn off notifications. Create a real study environment. Music? It depends. Lobdell said, if you're learning something new, something that requires reasoning, silence is better. Music with lyrics competes for your linguistic attention. But if you're doing something mechanical, reviewing flashcards you already master, ambient music can even help maintain focus and block external noise. Now the hard part, dealing with frustration. Lobdell saw this all the time. Student tries, can't do it, gets frustrated, quits. And that's where mindset comes in. When you make a mistake, when you can't do it, when you get stuck, that's not failure. It's information. You discovered where you need to work more. Don't quit. Adjust. Change the approach. Try again and again until it works. And here's something powerful Lobdell used in his classes. Rewards. Your brain responds to incentives. You study, hit a small goal, give yourself a reward. Doesn't have to be anything big. A chocolate, an episode of a series, a break to do something you like. This creates positive association with studying. Your brain starts wanting to study because it knows a reward is coming. It seems like cheap manipulation, but it works. There's one last thing Lobdell discovered that changes everything: the forgetting curve. Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered something disturbing. You learn something new, and in 24 hours you've already forgotten 50%. In a week, 90% is gone. Unless you do one thing, review. But not just any review. Strategically spaced review. First review, 24 hours after learning. Takes a few minutes. You reactivate the memory, strengthen the connections. Second review, 3 days later. Takes even less time because the memory is already stronger. Third review, 1 week. Fourth, 1 month. And so on, you build permanent memory. Each review gets easier, faster, because the information is consolidating. But most people do the opposite. Learn today, forget for weeks, and try to relearn everything the day before. It's building a house on sand. It doesn't hold. Lobdell also talked about something he called interleaved study. Instead of studying one subject for 3 hours straight, you mix different subjects. Study math 30 minutes, chemistry 30 minutes, history 30 minutes, back to math. It seems confusing, but it forces your brain to discriminate between different concepts, to make choices about which tool to use for which problem. And that dramatically increases retention. There's more. Lobdell noticed that many students are afraid to make mistakes. They do easy exercises repeatedly, get everything right and think they know. But they don't. Real learning happens in the hard exercises, the ones where you make mistakes, because corrected error becomes permanent learning. So seek out the hard problems, the ones that make you sweat, the ones you get wrong on the first try. Those are the ones that build real knowledge. And when you make a mistake, don't jump to the answer immediately. Try again. Struggle with the problem. The more you struggle, the stronger the memory when you finally get it right. Lobdell also had an interesting technique for reading dense texts. Most people read linearly from beginning to end. Lobdell taught, first, do a scan. Look at titles, subtitles, graphs, bold words. Build a mental map of what's coming. Then, turn each title into a question. Photosynthesis becomes, how does photosynthesis work? Now read looking to answer those questions. You'll read with purpose, not passively, and you'll retain much more. And when you finish reading, don't go to the next chapter. Stop. Close the book. Try to write a summary from memory. Just the main points, 3 or 4 sentences. If you can't, you didn't understand. Go back, read again, and try to summarize again. Only move on when you can explain the previous one in your own words. There's also the study environment issue. Lobdell was obsessed with this. Temperature, light, posture, everything matters. You can't concentrate if it's too cold or too hot. Dim light makes you sleepy. Studying lying in bed associates study with sleep. Create a specific space for study. Organized desk, comfortable chair, good light. And when you sit there, your brain already knows. Now it's work time. And about motivation, Lobdell was realistic. He said, you won't be motivated every day. There are days you don't want to study, and that's okay. The difference between who learns and who doesn't isn't motivation, it's discipline. Motivation is emotional, comes and goes. Discipline is decision. You decide you'll study regardless of how you feel, and then you sit and do it. On hard days, don't try to study 3 hours. Say, I'll study just 5 minutes. Just 5. Anyone can handle 5 minutes. And what happens? After 5 minutes, you're already engaged. The hard part is starting. Once you start, continuing is easier. So you trick your brain. Promise just 5 minutes, and end up doing 30-40 minutes without noticing. Lobdell also warned about something he called illusion of competence. You watch a video lecture and understand everything. The teacher explains. It seems crystal clear. You think, I understood perfectly. But understanding when someone explains isn't the same as being able to do it alone. It's like watching someone play basketball and thinking you know how to play. You don't. You need to grab the ball and try. So after class, after reading, you need to close everything and try to do it. Solve problems, answer questions, apply the concept. Only then do you discover if you really understood or just had the illusion of understanding. And to wrap up, Lobdell always said, learning is a process, not an event. You don't wake up one day knowing calculus. You build understanding brick by brick, day after day. Each study session adds another layer, and there are days it feels like you're not progressing, like you're spinning wheels. But your brain is working behind the scenes, making connections, and suddenly, everything clicks. What was confusing becomes clear. What was hard becomes obvious. That's Marty Lobdell's legacy. Not a bunch of abstract theory, but practical tools, tested, proven over decades of teaching and research. He took students who thought they were incapable and showed that the problem was never capacity. It was method. It was technique. It was understanding how the brain really works and working with it, not against it. And the best part? You can start now. No special equipment needed. No high IQ required, just method. Next study session. 25 minutes. Timer on. Phone in another room. Material in front. Read with attention. Stop. Close the book. Try to retrieve. Write what you remembered. Check what you got wrong. Try again. And when you do that, when you really apply Lobdell's method, you'll feel something you may never have felt before. The feeling that you actually learned. Not memorized. Not temporarily memorized. Learned for real. The information became knowledge. And knowledge doesn't get lost. It stays. It grows. It becomes part of who you are. For the first time in your life, you won't just be studying. You'll be learning for real.